All right, so I couldn't really come up with a name for what this talk should be called, but the subtitle would be something like things that browsers obviously know how to do, but won't expose or tell you how they do them and how to work around that. It's kind of a collection of just some hacks that we've used over the years and some that we haven't, but they're mostly just kind of fun. So I thought it was fitting for lightning. The spirit of lightning talk. Pull up a console too. So the first one is an API that we've all used, the class list API. So class list lets you do things like add or remove a class from the list. And it's super convenient. Much easier than the alternative, which was doing, I don't know, the old days of class name equals class name. I don't know. What would you do? Hi? Something like that. And then, of course, like you're left with a space that it doesn't really matter, but it's just all things you have to consider. And that would only, that one actually wouldn't work if we did something like try to remove the candy class like this, and you're gonna get it wrong, right? So anyway, it's a really convenient API, and has it's a method for working with tokens. So a token is kind of a space-separated list of strings, and it would be really, just to show that, class list is a DOM token list. There are a bunch of times when it would be convenient to use this API for attributes other than class, like say you want to remove one of these controllers. Your first thought might be to make a new token list, but you can't. Because it's a private API that the browser uses internally, even though they expose it globally. It's kind of frustrating. So we've used this in BC3 before, basically just a way to hack around that. Create a token list. Let's see if I can show the source here. Just create a function that accepts a string, creates a new element, assigns that string to the class name, and then returns the class list. So we could get this element's tokens. Great. So now we have a token list. Just like this is the hack to do this. Basically use a private API, and then we can remove candy. And it has a toString method. So then we can just there, ta-da. So that's kind of, I don't know, private API hacking 101. The next thing that browsers obviously know how to do, but won't tell you how to do. You've probably used the dataset API before. Allows you to, rather than get attribute data candy or data candy type, you can access it via the dataset property, which converts these dasherized attribute names to camel case names. So candy type. I have mixed feelings about doing that generally in code because it kind of it makes it hard to well, it makes it hard to search your code base for things that might be using data candy type. You kind of have to remember to search both. But I think what's interesting here is that the browser, I should also show that you can also add attributes, candy color, candy, I should do it this way. Candy color red. And it added the data candy color for us. So yeah, that's convenient. I think what's kind of more interesting is that the browser clearly knows how to both dasherize and camelize strings because it's doing that transformation here to there or the other way around. It's turning data candy type into camelized candy type. So can we use this to just extract some utilities functions to both dasherize and camelize? And the answer is yes, obviously. We can do similar to the last time. If we want to dasherize a string, create an element, assign the dasherized string to the data set, and then get the element's attributes. So basically, it only has one attribute. That attribute name is going to be data thing, dasherize, and then slice just chops off the leading data dash. So we can, yeah, there we go. And then we can do the inverse, same idea, except this time we set an attribute and then we just return, we can just get the keys of the data set and return the first one. So voila. I don't remember if, I think Sam, I don't know if you remember, I think we maybe used this at one point in tricks. It's kind of just a fun trick and it's pretty easy to do with regular expression and just, I forget exactly what it looks like, but it's probably like the slowest possible way to do this transformation, but it's just kind of interesting that browsers clearly have an implementation for this kind of thing, but they just refuse to, well, I don't know, refuse is the wrong word. They just don't have a public API for doing it. Number 4. So this one came up, we recently added right to left language support to tricks, meaning if you type in a right to left language, it will be aligned right to left correctly, and cursor position kind of, cursor movement sort of flips around and the cursor, the end is now this side instead of, it's the start. So it's the left side instead of the right side. And browsers clearly know how to determine if text is left to right or right to left, because you can give any element this auto value for the dir attribute, and it will automatically detect if text is right to left, left to right. And I wanted to know that information. I wanted the answer is like, is this right to left or left to right? Because we didn't want to use this in tricks. We could have just given every block element dir equals auto and let the browser align it for us. What we didn't like about that is it makes it hard to apply CSS to conditional CSS to say right to left text. There are some pseudo properties, I think. I don't know how widely supported they are, So you can, you can style right to left text even though it has auto on it. But that requires that the browser that you're viewing it in supports those CSS properties. And like in the case of Hey, or any app really, if we store this in the database, we're now relying on uh, everyone else's browser to do the same detection and correctly display it right to left or left to right. So what we really wanted was to assign dir equals RTL to blocks that have right to left text explicitly, and then not do that otherwise. And that gives us a really clean CSS hook. You can just style dir equals RTL to say, like on block quotes, we draw the kind of the bar on the right side instead of the left side. And we did that. This might be hard to read. I wonder if I can actually just show it. Well, maybe I'll just hi. Okay. And then we can get, so that's what we wanted, but there is no API for this whatsoever. And we can, just to show that this actually does what I said it did. If we change just this element's text content to a left to right string, it jumps over here and now we get left to right. And we did this with a couple APIs that combined gave us broad browser support. Just show briefly what it looks like. I don't know how hard this is to read. One, there's, this is a CSS, what are these called? It's not a pseudo property, but you can match an element based on its dir, so dir LTR or dir RTL. So we can test if one of those matches, and if it does, then we know it's left to right or right to left. I think this only works in Firefox right now. So, and otherwise throws an error, which is rough. So we can catch that. This isn't exactly how we implemented it, but it's kind of the most compact way. I should back up here. The first thing we're doing is we're accepting a string, creating an input element, setting its dir to auto, just like this element, and giving it the value of the string we passed in. And then that's the element we're testing for CSS match. If that fails, we follow through, create a form, use this property that I didn't know about until digging into this called dir name, which is a name that you assign. And if any input has a dir name property and you submit the form, you'll get an additional parameter in the form data specifying whether it's RTL or LTR. So this could be useful if you're submitting a form to a server and you want that contextual information, but we can just kind of abuse it here and create a new form data and then ask that form data for this dir name, which is essentially like having a second hidden input that has RTL or LTR. And so that's what we're doing in Trix now. If you, I can just show that real quick. So by default, you just get a plain div. And if you enter right to left text, we add dir equals RTL. And that gives us the ability to write, like I said, kind of simple CSS selectors that match. Let's see if I can show that real quick. Just do things like this, and we can put the border on the right side instead of the left side. Okay, grand finale. And this is something that came up in the BC3 campfire not long ago that I just couldn't let go of because it's, I'll just show it. This is a simplified representation of the little text field for boosts in BC3. I think boosts have a max length of 16 maybe, or 12, and which means you can type 5 letters and then the browser stops you from typing. Where that gets interesting is, well, just kind of annoying, really. That means you can enter maybe two emojis, and that is, of course, just because the string, it's setting a max length more or less on the byte length of the string, right? So that's the string, but its length is 4. All right, well, we can kind of accept that. But what somebody wrote into support about was, if you have an emoji with a skin tone modifier, variation selector, I can't even enter 2 now. And the end result was like, okay, great, like Basecamp is racist. Like if you're using skin tone modifiers, you may boost less, which feels icky. And it would, conceptually, what we want is 4 characters as people think of them, right? Just to do this again, the length of that one emoji is 4. So that's why we can't enter 2. We can enter A, but we can't enter another one. Ideally, we'd be able to set like max character length, or these things are often called, I don't know where the term comes from, but grapheme is the representation of a single visible character. So in Ruby, you can do basically take a string and ask for grapheme clusters. This won't work here, obviously. And that'll return an array correctly split around each grapheme. And I guess what's frustrating here is, like, we know that the browser knows that where the boundary is, because if you move the cursor, it goes to the right place. Like, it's not jumping in the middle of some combined code points. So we know the browser understands what a character is as people think of them, but there's no way to, like, there's no way to get that information. You can kind of do it by creating an array, which will do like interesting things if you do this. But that's not right, because like we think of this as 1, not 7. So I hacked this together. We're not using it in production by any means, but a function to give you back basically an equivalent to that Ruby API. And this might not work perfectly, but yeah, like that's what we want, right? Now, the way I'm doing this is kind of horrific, but oh, did that mess anything up? We know that selections understand these boundaries. So we can use the browser's range API, which is part of the selection API, to kind of glean that information. This isn't kind of how it works isn't really interesting, the code itself, but basically we can create a new selection as far as the browser is concerned, and then modify it until its width. So we can create a range for this text node, set its offsets. So you can set start and end, and then just keep expanding the offset until its width changes. So it's like if you go from 0, 0 to 0, 1, in this case, you wouldn't actually be selecting anything. You'd be selecting the first byte or two of this multi-byte character. So this API just keeps incrementing that number until you get a width change, and then you get a width change. And by doing that, you can kind of do what you want. It requires a DOM. It requires inserting an element, a hidden element into the page and then removing it. It doesn't require stealing focus or the actually creating a visible selection, which is nice. But it is a way to do a thing that browser knows how to do, but won't tell you how they do it. So this, I want to bring this to BC3 eventually, or some version of it, because I don't know, I can't forget about. Somebody took the time to write into support saying like basically boosts are racist. They said it very nicely, and that's my translation, but I kind of agree. That's the end. The title of this talk was generated by throwing an error. Any questions, comments, other hacks you want to share?
This is awesome, Javon. Thank you.
Sure.
Javon, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
That last hack you showed with the range, that doesn't actually create a selection or anything. Like if the user had a selection already active on the page, or even in that element, it wouldn't change that, would it?
Right. So there's sort of two pieces to the selection API. There's you can do window get selection,
Okay.
which is a selection instance, and then selections have ranges. So what this little function does is just create ranges, and doesn't add them to the selection. So yeah, the answer is yes. It doesn't alter the visible selection or steal focus in any way. It does require that you use a DOM node that's in the DOM. You can't use it on a detached element because you need to measure its width. But that's fine. It would be an unusable solution if it. I mean, I guess you could stash the selection, do your thing, and then restore the selection. But and it's probably like probably causes like forces a repaint. I'm guessing. The browser does it probably does a ton of work that it doesn't need to do, but that's because there's no API for dealing with graphemes or even characters that are more than 1 byte.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Another good hack is an old one is using inner text on a hidden element to HTML escape a string.
That is a good one. Yeah. So let's see. We can make an element, set its text content to a string of HTML, whatever. And then we can return the elements inner HTML, which is now escaped for us. Yep, that one's great. I think you could also do the same with an input. Assign, no, then you can't get the escaped HTML out. So yeah, I've used that one a bunch. It's just kind of, I don't know, feels more actually robust than trying to correctly escape it yourself using a regular expression, because we know that the browser is always going to turn text content into text. Yeah, good one. Good. All right, well, were there questions in the chat? I couldn't see anything. All right, well, my battery's dying. So I'll end the meeting then.
Thanks, Javon.
Sure,
Thanks, Siobhan.
Yeah, thanks, Javon. That was awesome.
sure.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys. Bye.
You too.